sixth grade. I hope you're doing well today. I know we always start with a video, but if this is the first thing you've done for English, please go back into the Google Classroom assignment. There are certain questions that I want you to answer from this presentation today and in a specific format. So if you go ahead and look at those questions first before I start, it'll be a little bit easier for you as we move forward. Okay, so I'm going to let you pause the video here if you need to. Otherwise, let's keep going. We're going to start talking about reading for information. People are always in search of information, and we have lots of websites and newspapers that tell us different things, but how do we find information that we need? In this workshop, you'll learn to read texts that explain and inform. So we need to talk about organizational patterns. Expository texts are texts that explain. When expository texts are well written, they can clarify an issue, a process, or a situation. To present information in a clear and logical way, authors of expository texts use organizational patterns or text structures to develop their main ideas and express their viewpoints. For example, an author who uses a problem and solution organizational pattern states a problem and then provides a successful solution to the problem. The author may also reveal his or her feelings about the problem and its solution. Notice how a problem and solution organizational pattern develops the main idea of the following article. So we're going to look at this article right over here, okay? The title is always bigger. A lot of times it's in a different font too. And the title tells you the specific topic of the article. So food ad tricks. So we know that whatever we see here is going to be a way of taking pictures of food that tricks us into thinking it's something different than it actually is. So let's look at just underneath the food ad and tricks. Lights, camera, glue. These foods have starring roles in TV commercials, but they won't behave on the set. With a few clever tricks, advertisers can make them look mouth-watering and yummy. Ice cream. The problem with filming ice cream is that it melts under the hot lights of a movie set. So the solution? Get a stand-in. Mix a scoop of vegetable shortening with corn syrup and a powdered sugar, and that's how they actually create the ice cream. What about this one? Cereal. The problem is it gets mushy and soggy looking in a bowl of milk. So the solution? Pour white glue into the cereal. And lastly, we have a sidebar. So a sidebar is this piece here that's set off from the rest of the article. It's usually used to emphasize a specific point, but it's always set apart. Can they do that? Food ad tricks are not considered false advertising as long as the food they're actually selling you is real. All right, let's talk more about some organizational patterns. We've got an expository text on the next slide, and we need to keep a couple of things in mind. What situation does the writer want to explain to readers, and how do organizational patterns develop authors' important ideas? So let's look at this. The title is Swimmers Beware, Jellyfish Are Everywhere. And we know that's a title because it's the first thing of the article. It's also larger. So let's read this aloud. What are jellyfish? Jellyfish are not fish at all. They are invertebrates, relatives of corals and sea anemones. A jelly has no head, brain, heart, eyes, or ears. It has no bones either. To capture prey for food, jellies have a net of tentacles that contain poisonous stinging cells. When the tentacles brush against prey, or say a person's leg, thousands of tiny stinging cells explode, launching barbed stingers and poison into the victim. Where danger lurks. All jellies sting, but not all jellies have poison that hurts humans. Of the 2,000 species of jellyfish, only about 70 seriously harm or occasionally kill people. Listed here are the more dangerous jellies and where you can find or avoid them. Lion's mane, Atlantic Ocean, from above the Arctic Circle to Florida, Gulf of Mexico, Pacific Ocean from Alaska to the Southern California. Portuguese man-of-war, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea near the Bahamas, and the West Indies. Sea nettle, Chesapeake Bay, Pacific Ocean from Alaska to Southern California, Atlantic Ocean from Massachusetts to Florida, and the Gulf of Mexico. So here is the sidebar. So let's look at that. Don't get stung. Take note of jellyfish warning signs posted on the beach. Be careful around jellies washed up on the sand. Some still sting if their tentacles are wet. If you are stung, wash the wound with vinegar or rubbing alcohol. All right, so let's talk about what we've learned about expository texts. Remember that expository texts are texts that explain. So what does the writer explain in lines 1 through 5? Let's look up here again. So it starts here with a subtitle. What are jellyfish? Jellyfish are not fish at all. They are invertebrates, relatives of corals and sea anemones. So it's telling you what a jellyfish actually is and saying that it's not a fish. Let's look at that boxed information right down here real quick. And let's see if we can figure out what kind of organizational pattern it shows. To capture prey for food, jellies have a net of tentacles that contain poisonous stinging cells. When the tentacles brush against prey, or say a person's leg, thousands of tiny stinging cells explode, launching barbed stingers into the poison into the victim. The cause and effect organizational pattern shows how one event brings about or causes another. Why is this organizational pattern appropriate for explaining how jellyfish use their tentacles? Why do you think? So what that box section is doing is it's giving us a cause and effect relationship between what happens when the tentacles brush against prey or someone's leg, as we're not typically considered jellyfish prey. What problem does the section labeled Don't Get Stung address? Well, this is pretty easy. It's telling you how not to get stung. And it also talks about how you can, what kind of treatment you can do if you do get stung. And lastly, lists are often used to sort an organizational pattern called classification. What information about different kinds of jellyfish does the list give you in lines 26 through 38? Well, right here it tells us the kind of jellyfish that we as American readers are likely to see, because all of these areas it's discussing are in American waters or very close to where Americans might be swimming. So it's easy to see it as a list, and these bullet points, that's what this is a bullet point, helps us identify something kind of quickly. Okay, so let's move on to summarizing informational texts. Writers use organizational patterns in the hopes of conveying their ideas clearly. However, it's up to you to identify and summarize the most important parts of a text. You can create a summary of any piece of writing, and you guys do that with your novel notes. When you summarize a text, you restate the author's main ideas and details in your own words. Creating summaries of informational texts is especially useful if you're doing research from a number of sources, because your summaries will help you recognize the ways in which one source differs from another. So you see this in the annotated bibliography that you guys do in your science project. Try to maintain the meaning and logical order of the main ideas and details when you summarize across texts. And what that means is when you're summarizing information from several different places. It will help you evaluate how each source covers similar content. So you want to follow these steps when you're summarizing a text. First of all, a summary is much shorter than the original. It's about 1/4 the length, and it includes only the most important details. In nonfiction, these are the main ideas and key supporting details. Stop at the end of each paragraph to restate in a sentence what the author wrote. This will help you find the main ideas and details. Do not include your own opinions, because your personal beliefs or feelings are inappropriate for a summary, because you're only concentrating on what that writer says, not what you think. A summary should only include the information from the text. So let's look at another example of a summary. A summary of Swimmers Beware, Jellyfish Are Everywhere. And that's the article we just looked at about jellyfish. In Swimmers Beware, Jellyfish Are Everywhere, Susan Jacks provides an overview of how to avoid being stung by a jellyfish. The writer explains how jellyfish use their tentacles to sting their victims. However, while all jellyfish sting, not all stings cause humans pain. The writer gives a list of tips to avoid being stung. She also explains how to wash the wound if you are stung. She goes on to list places where especially dangerous jellyfish, such as the lion's mane, the Portuguese man of war, and the sea nettle are found, and suggests being careful when you go to those places. However, I don't think the possibility of being stung is a good reason to stay away from the Gulf of Mexico. So let's look at this. Where do you find the main idea of the article? It's in the very first sentence. It says, in Swimmers Beware, Jellyfish Are Everywhere, Susan Jacks provides an overview of how to avoid being stung by the jellyfish. That's the main idea. The writer gives a list of tips to avoid being stung. She also explains how to wash the wound if you are stung. Should that be included in the summary? Since the sidebar is not actually part of the article, the part of the sentence that says how to wash the wound if you are stung is inappropriate because it's in the sidebar, not the actual article. And let's look at the last sentence though. However, I don't think the possibility of being stung is a good reason to stay away from the Gulf of Mexico. That's not appropriate for a summary because that is not Susan Jack's opinion. That is the person who wrote this. It's their opinion. And that's inappropriate because the writer of this summary is giving his or her opinion, not just sticking to what the actual article says. Make sure that you turn in your notes as instructed in Google Classroom by 3:30 today. Have a great day. Bye.